Imagine detonating 35 tons of dynamite inside a conquered military fortress, expecting total demolition, only to find the massive walls standing completely untouched. This concrete monster had already survived the most catastrophic siege of World War II, completely baffling the military engineers of the world's greatest superpowers. The mystery was no longer how to capture the crumbling capital. It was how much explosive punishment a single building could absorb before breaking. These were the Berlin Flak Towers, an engineering anomaly so heavily over-designed that conventional warfare simply could not destroy them. To understand how they achieved the impossible, we have to look back to the closing weeks of the war, when an unstoppable army met an unmovable wall. Marshal Zhukov commanded an army of 1.3 million soldiers massed on the Oder front, ready to crush Berlin. Yet, as the Soviet lines closed in, orders were clear. Circle, don't storm. The towers, with their concrete walls nearly 8 feet thick, stood as islands of resistance in a sea of rubble. Soviet planners weighed the cost. Every direct assault on these fortresses would mean thousands of lives and a mountain of ammunition for a single block of concrete. Instead, the Red Army's doctrine favored momentum. The focus was to seal Berlin, cut off escape, and force surrender by pressure, not attrition. The towers were isolated, contained, and left behind the advancing front. This decision wasn't an oversight or a sign of weakness. It was a calculated move, born from hard lessons on the Eastern Front and the sheer scale of the forces at Zhukov's disposal. The Soviets brought out their heaviest siege gun, the 203mm B-4 howitzer, dreaded across the Eastern Front and known to German defenders as Stalin's sledgehammer. Each shell weighed as much as a grown man and packed enough explosive to shatter a reinforced bunker wall. Yet when the B-4 howitzers opened fire on the Flak Tower, the result was almost surreal. Shells slammed into the concrete, sending up clouds of dust and debris, but the tower's 11-foot-thick walls shrugged off the barrage. Soviet gunners watched in disbelief as some shells reportedly ricocheted, leaving only shallow scars on the battered facade. The legendary weapon, capable of smashing fortifications from Leningrad to Königsberg, could not break the tower's grip on the city. Every impact that failed to penetrate only deepened the sense that the structure was something beyond ordinary engineering. The Red Army's mightiest artillery had met its match, and the question of what could bring down such a fortress hung in the air, unanswered. The Flak Tower was built on a scale that defied belief. Its outer walls reached up to 11 feet thick in places, packed with dense steel rebar and poured in a single, seamless mass. The roof slab alone measured nearly 5 feet deep. Altogether, the main block contained more than 150,000 cubic meters of concrete and 15,000 tons of steel, figures that dwarfed anything in Allied engineering manuals. On top of this, fortress stood 4 twin-mounted 12.8-centimeter Flak 40 guns, each capable of firing high-explosive shells at a rate of up to 12 rounds per minute per barrel. These weapons had an effective ceiling of 9 kilometers, and in the last days of the battle, their barrels were lowered to sweep the streets with direct fire, turning the tower into a 360-degree fortress. The combination of this physical mass and concentrated firepower made the structure nearly untouchable by conventional weapons. Even the heaviest bombs and artillery rounds could do little more than chip away at its surface. For the Soviet assault teams and their commanders, the numbers were inescapable. No realistic barrage could guarantee a breach, and every failed attempt only reinforced the tower's reputation as an immovable object. Inside the Zoo Flak Tower, the reality of survival pressed against every wall. The shelter was built for 15,000, but as Berlin collapsed, twice that number crammed into its concrete corridors. 30,000 people, including families, wounded soldiers, and the elderly, pushed shoulder to shoulder in stifling darkness. The air grew thick with sweat and fear. Electric lights flickered, then failed, leaving only the hum of diesel generators and the distant rumble of bombardment. Water had to be rationed to a few sips per person. Latrines overflowed. Children cried through the night, and the wounded filled the hospital wing far beyond its 85-bed limit. Howard K. Smith, the American correspondent, called it a fantastic monstrosity from a lost world, huge and positively frightening to look at. For those trapped inside, the tower was both fortress and prison, a place where every breath felt borrowed and every hour stretched by the knowledge that outside the city was burning to ash. On July 28, 1947, British engineers packed 25 tons of explosives into the Zoo Flak Tower's foundations. The world's press gathered, expecting a spectacle. Instead, the blast sent up a plume of dust, rattled windows for blocks, and left the tower standing, cracked but unmoved. Journalists traded glances, one muttering, "Made in Germany," as if the phrase alone explained the absurdity. The rubble barely shifted. Photos the next morning showed the same hulking mass, battered but defiant, looming over the bomb-scarred city. The failure was public, undeniable, and almost mocking. For all the devastation Berlin had suffered, this fortress refused to yield. On August 30, 1948, demolition engineers returned with a final plan: 35 tons of explosives wired in a synchronized sequence through the tower's foundation and core. The blast roared through Berlin's ruins, sending shockwaves that rattled the city. This time, the monstrous block of concrete finally surrendered, collapsing in a thunderous avalanche. Forensic surveys afterward showed that only a charge of this magnitude, precisely timed, could fracture the dense web of steel and concrete. The tower's collapse proved just how much destruction it had absorbed, and how close it came to outlasting even the most determined efforts to erase it. Even now, the towers cast their shadow, monuments to a war's extremes and an unanswered question: how much violence can concrete withstand before it finally yields? Some mysteries refuse to crumble.